Hello! And welcome back to Party Trick Astrology. I'm Nina.
I'm Shaina.
And this is Lilith and Aquarius. As you can see, Shaina has gone full force performance art alien weirdo, and I'm not wearing beige. I also was having problems with my wireless earbuds, so we've got this Aquarian over-the-ear headphone look. I look like a little Twitch streamer like the kids these days, so technological and cool. In this video, and in this series for that matter, we discuss the Black Moon Lilith, which can mean your mean Lilith, your true Lilith. There are different ways of calculating the same thing, the same node. If you want to know more about that, we have a video all about Lilith, all the different Liliths, what she represents. You can check that out. In our Lilith series, we also have been doing Lilith through the signs and through the houses. We really are in the home stretch at this point. On top of that, there's so much more that we have to offer you guys. Like, if you want more of us, there's so much. Link in the description, separate YouTube channels, Instagrams. Shaina has a TikTok. I have a newsletter and merch and so much stuff going on. So with Lilith in Aquarius, Aquarius is an interesting energy, an interesting archetype. I can say that because I am an Aquarius. I'm acting like so insane in this video. I think it's because it's like we're in my home sign, baby. Okay. So Aquarius can definitely be a chaotic energy. It is one of the lucky signs that is ruled by not one, but two malefic planets in the form of Saturn and Uranus. And especially when Lilith is in Aquarius, things can go off the rail quite quickly. Aquarius is the rebel. Aquarius is the contrarian. And so is Lilith in a lot of ways. Lilith is a rebel, rebelling against what she sort of grew up in or what she was repressed from, and kind of going to the depths, the most destructive parts of that sign. Some themes that show up with Lilith and Aquarius are sort of this black and white thinking, as Aquarius is this not only fixed but quite radical sign. I think the main thing is the rebellion really comes through in this placement. In fact, James Dean has this placement, and what do you know James Dean from? Rebel without a cause. The exile part of Lilith in Aquarius usually has to do with just being exiled from your ability to veer off from the straight and narrow, think outside of the box, go against society in some kind of way. So the rebellion, which is already inherent in Lilith and in Aquarius, just manifests itself tenfold usually when you're acting out of your Lilith and Aquarius, and sometimes very much, since Lilith is nonsensical, without a cause.
With Lilith and Aquarius, kind of like with what Nina was saying, you're going to be exiled from feeling like you can fully express your unique and individual personality. You know, like any time that you might have been weird or tried to be, you know, honestly, even just your most authentic self, you might have gained a lot of pushback, and especially from your peers. I think that with Lilith and Aquarius, there can be a big feeling of being rejected from social groups, rejected from friend groups. You might have had to really rebel against the social conditionings that were placed upon you. There might have been a lot of possibly rules about how you can act within a society, how you should be seen within a society, all that kind of stuff. Because Aquarius is the 11th sign, so this is a real zoom out humanity kind of big-minded sign. I wonder if anybody with Lilith and Aquarius has experienced like being exiled from being exiled, like they've never been exiled before, and so they want to exile themselves. Like, you find reasons to exile yourself to kind of like feel above others, feel above society. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to fit in with these people. Fuck these people. I'm gonna exile myself, you know?
No, that totally makes sense to me. Your exile from your Lilith in Aquarius can manifest in totally opposite ways. Let's give some examples in especially like a creative or otherwise like cool, hip kind of community. You were the odd one out, you were not seen as valuable to the group, or you didn't fully align with whatever black and white thinking of a group. I always think of like, I was a musical theater kid, so ensembles and theater, and a way that you can be exiled from that feeling of the Aquarian community specifically can be, you know, feeling like you need to follow the straight and narrow and go to a particular college, a particular school, be involved in a particular community in which you don't align with those values and you aren't allowed to express your individuality, or their sort of ethos is counter to your own ethos.
And I feel like even with like my outfit, like, yeah, I definitely went for like the obvious like Aquarius weirdo thing, which a part of me was like, it's too on the nose, but then another part of me was like, I want to wear this. But also I feel like Lilith and Aquarius can possibly go the other way of like sometimes really, you know, because it is Lilith, there is some discomfort about that sign. There might even, instead of, you know, obsessively wanting to stand out, obsessively wanting to feel like your own individual, there might be some shame and conservatism or feelings of needing to not stand out as much, you know, trying to appear like you fit in because you feel on the inside like you so naturally don't.
Definitely, and that likely has to do with your own relationship with your Lilith. Sometimes that Lilith is like a real gremlin that we try to repress. Some people are really into diving into their Lilith, which sort of leads into the next point of after or as a result of the exile that you experience with your particular Lilith placement, you end up going extremely and intently in the direction of the sign that Lilith is in, to the point that it is nonsensical and even detrimental to your well-being. That's why I think that it's like, oh, so poetic that James Dean has Lilith and Aquarius and he's in literally rebel without a cause. Because a big thing about the Aquarius archetype is that you're veering off from the straight and narrow, you're veering off from societal expectations and questioning the norm in order to create revolution. And there's a purpose behind it, usually a humanitarian, equality, social justice purpose behind it. But when it's Lilith, it doesn't follow that same sort of purposeful mindset. It really can be rebelling without a cause, standing out for no reason, maybe vehemently opposing the social norm or trying to create revolution, but without necessarily a goal in mind, without necessarily a real passion to make things better, because Lilith is ultimately destructive, and especially Aquarius is all about helping humanity, and Lilith is just all about the self, own pleasure, own just kind of like ego satisfaction.
Adding on to what Nina was saying, you know, rebellion just for the sake of being rebellious, being a contrarian just for the sake of being a contrarian, doing things just for the shock value of it. So yeah, these people will do anything to retain their individuality and their freedom, even if that means possibly stepping on your individuality and your sense of rebellion. Like, they just want to make sure they get to express theirs. And I think that a big thing that Lilith and Aquarius needs to learn is that, you know, you can't start a rebellion or a revolution by yourself. And Lilith is very much a, I want to do this by myself kind of thing. But, you know, Aquarius, you know, deals with a lot of people because it needs a lot of people to back it up, to make change happen. And Lilith and Aquarius might just have so many troubles relating to other people or getting along or be feeling like they're included that they might just always try to be going at things alone, which can be really hard and lonely for sure.
Yeah, and part of the reason why Lilith and Aquarius might want to do things by themselves is also because they want the revolution and the act of rebellion to fulfill just themselves. And I think that Lilith and Aquarius can also create a lot of criticality towards others. And again, Lilith is interested in hierarchy. You know, if you go back to the story of Lilith and Adam, she wanted to be on top. She was not going to be submissive. The entire principle of Aquarius is that everyone has their place, has their unique skills, and nothing can be done without the many atoms of a community. That's funny, atoms. Without the many atoms of the community creating something together. Lilith takes the Aquarius archetype when Lilith is in Aquarius and makes it about hierarchy, makes it about the individual, and that can create criticism towards other people, distaste for other people, a lack of being able to understand that people are equal though different. That's really the Aquarius model. Lilith and Aquarius can miss that message and be critical, feel like everyone needs to be a particular type of rebel, needs to follow very particular ideologies, and really miss out from the values of community. So it's all very interesting, the similar and then very different natures of Lilith and then Aquarius.
Yeah, these people definitely have, I feel like, a me against the world kind of mentality. They probably even feel safer in that, or like that's more of their comfort zone.
If you feel like the world is against you, then it's never your responsibility. And that's extremely comforting. Not having responsibility, not taking responsibility for your actions feels, why do I keep doing this? Unfortunately for the Lilith and Aquarius, its responsibility is empowering. And so by feeling like the world is against them, or I should say by feeding into that narrative actively, you're missing out on the empowerment that the regular archetype of Aquarius does provide.
This is going a little bit back, but Lilith is a manipulative placement. And I think where Lilith in Aquarius manipulates is through that kind of way that we were talking about, is seeming selflessly involved with a greater idea or this revolution or, you know, fixing the world. But in reality, with Lilith and Aquarius, they're going to be using this as a way for their own gains, or probably more than anything for their own notoriety. Because, you know, as much as the 10th house and Capricorn is about success, the 11th house and Aquarius is very much about notoriety and very much is a big fame signal in the birth chart. You know, more people know you, the more 11th house Aquarius stuff you have. You're influencing the masses more when you have more Aquarius stuff. So sometimes I think the underhanded motivation can very much be, now I am influencing the masses. And I feel like now I am in the history books, creating your own counterculture to kind of satisfy your own ego.
Here's a big Lilith and Aquarius thing, like humanity is a virus, or one specific group of people is a virus. Like Brian Laundrie very much had these ideas if you read into like his journals and Instagram, whatever, and you know, we all know how that turned out. Sort of, anyone following the Gabby Petito case.
Something else that I think could be a characteristic of Lilith and Aquarius, because Aquarius does have a lot to do with being a branding yourself, you know? And with Lilith and Aquarius, you might very much kind of be a little bit of a sellout, possibly. I mean, maybe it could also go the other way, where if you have other things that better support this, you are like, you take, you know, to great care and responsibility to not be a sellout and to not kind of exploit your brand and notoriety. It can very much also go that way, but it can also kind of fall into the path of, you know, becoming a brand at any cost and losing a lot of your humility and humanity for the sake of your brand, for the sake of all that stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah, because Lilith has no integrity, and especially can have a difficulty with practicing what they preach, you know, walking the talk.
With Lilith and Aquarius, I would not consider this a Lilith placement that's, you know, naturally indicative of being oh so sexy, oh so lusty. You know, these people are definitely kind of awkward. What is very attractive about them and what will draw people in is their uniqueness. They do have this erotic uniqueness and individuality that somebody will be like, oh, that person's different than everyone else. You know, that person's a manic pixie dream girl. You know, confident even. You can really, whether or not you feel a lot of confidence, you can really display that you are very confident.
I even think that with Lilith and Aquarius, they might resent, again, their normalness, their traditional sexuality, their traditional sexual appeal. Like James Dean, you know, he in the 50s was like, James Dean, daydream, look in your eyes, like very much the standard of beauty. But at the end of the day, in his career, he moved what it meant to like be a man on screen into a very different direction, expressing sort of like things that were not typically masculine, which, you know, back in the 50s just meant like crying. But then there's also, look at me with all these celebrities, Cara Delevingne, manic pixie dream girl in her debut role in that John Green movie adaptation, and she was obviously a model, like presenting traditional standards of beauty, but then she would want to change her appearance, likely resented it, you know, and she's, I don't know what exactly she is, but she's queer, and, you know, wanting to express that in her looks. And even her Met Gala look was peg the patriarchy. There's a lot of like almost rebel without a cause with that message, because it's like you want to be combative against the social norms of patriarchy, and yet you're using this very violently patriarchal language and symbolism to show how you want to you know, defeat the patriarchy. So it's interesting. Again, it's like not very well thought out. So it almost sounds like, let's just do something a little controversial for the sake of it. There's not a lot of thought put into what the message is actually conveying. So I thought that was interesting.
That's a brilliant point. And I feel like it displays that kind of thing that I was mentioning with Lilith and Aquarius, and kind of like their brand. Like, ooh, my brand is that, like, I'm a feminist, and this is what feminists want to hear, right? But it's kind of tone deaf, because she doesn't actually feel it. She doesn't actually know what the fuck she's talking about. But she's like, yeah, this'll get me internet famous. This'll be good for my brand, you know? We've talked about brands and influence on a very grand scale, but, you know, with an everyday person, Lilith and Aquarius doesn't always come into contact with that kind of stuff. And so this can also, on a more relatable level, talk about friend groups and social circles, for sure. You can sabotage friend groups, and you can really spread malice. Remember, this is an air sign. It is about communication. It can be a little bit drama-y. This can also create a lot of trust issues within friendships and friend groups. You know, I think that this might be a placement that also kind of preemptively acts as though somebody is going to turn against them. Kind of that paranoia that, oh, my friend groups always turn against me. Oh, I know they're going to, so before they turn against me, I'm going to turn against them and spread malice and spread hate about them. Can very much be, I think, a paranoia that comes into play.
It almost makes me think of Mean Girls, which interestingly was written by a Lilith and Leo, but it's all about sort of like being exiled from the group and then getting introduced into the group, but then wanting to separate yourself from the group, and instead of being part of the group and being grateful for how you're part of the group, to be in a hierarchical position within that group and take other people down whilst in it.
Yeah, or even the fact that she was like, I forget Lindsay Lohan's character's name, but that she was like, oh, I would never want to be them. But secretly, she wants to know what it's like. And I think that can very much be that Lilith and Aquarius.
A simple way to look at branding is just like the cafeteria table groups. That's very much Aquarian energy there.
You know, you're the jocks, you're the popular kids, you're the goths, you're even the weird kids. Like, you might not even feel like you fit into the weirdos, you know, can very much be a thing. Also, something that's very possible with Lilith and Aquarius is that you may be of a different background from where you grew up around, and that can feel very isolating. Like, I think a really perfect example of Lilith and Aquarius is Trevor Noah, because even the fact that he was born in South Africa during apartheid, and when he was born, he was an illegal child. He was exiled from being a person, which is a very Aquarius kind of feeling, you know? So he didn't feel like he was allowed in his hometown, basically. And then he moves to America, and there are still probably a lot of, I can't think of the word, like daily things that people do, you know, that he didn't realize that he did differently, and he probably feels like he doesn't really belong anywhere to anything or to anyone, and that can be kind of confusing as well. You also can possibly attract friends that are not going to really be there when you need them, because there can be some detachment. Of course, that's the word that everybody likes to use with Aquarius, but this can also relate to your friends. You might not have very reliable friends, and you also can possibly not be the most reliable friend because it is Lilith.
Yeah, because the word detachment is so popular with Aquarius because it is the water bearer. It's actually compartmentalizing the water, the emotions is what water represents in astrology, and using it for the sake of giving it to other people. But without the real other-oriented side of Aquarius incorporated into what the Lilith in Aquarius feels, it really just does become bottled up emotions, compartmentalization, to the point where you're not accessing that compartment at any time, and can feel protective of giving your water, giving your emotions to other people. There can be a theme with Lilith and Aquarius of being bottled up so much until it overtakes you and your cup runneth over with bottled up emotions.
Like kind of as we mentioned, Aquarius will be like me against the world, but also sometimes they can have this weird relationship with being alone. They can, you know, be like, I just want to be alone, I want to be left alone, and then when they're alone, like, wow, I really hate this, I really hate being alone. How dare the world be so cruel to make me be alone, when it's like, maybe you put yourself in that situation, Lilith and Aquarius, you know?
Leave me alone, I'm lonely. Leave me alone, I'm lonely. You should know to come check on me, and you should know, but I will never be overt with what I am actually feeling.
Exactly. Moving into something else, I think Aquarius, especially Lilith and Aquarius, can definitely have kind of a know-it-all kind of syndrome feeling to them. And these people can really use their intellect and their knowledge for their own benefit, because Aquarius really is like a genius energy. Uranus is a really genius energy, and the fact that it's also co-ruled by Saturn adds a lot of discipline on top of that. But because it's Lilith, they might just use that for their own benefit or for it to serve them.
This aspect of the Lilith in Aquarius really reads The Secret History by Donna Tartt to me. If anyone's ever read that book, it's extremely like dark academia, and there's murder involved, and it's just like a bunch of kids who are like, I'm so great, I know the classics. I know the classics. Did you know I know the classics and I'm better than you? And then they kill someone. And they kill someone in their own group. And this isn't a spoiler. It's like the first thing that they say.
That's such a good example. Like, what the actual fuck? You know, a real superiority complex can come from this. You know, God complex, obviously. I know, I always hate throwing around the same few words that Aquarius gets.
You don't understand me. All you ever say is that I'm detached and have a God complex and I'm an alien.
Something that I will say is I feel like, especially with Aquarius, like, the whole point of their quirks is that it's that person's individual quirks. And every Aquarius's quirks are different, and so that's why I think it's so hard to kind of generalize them. I mean, Aquarius doesn't want to be generalized. Aquarius probably, you know, likes that they don't resonate with their horoscope as much. That might be kind of like ingrained in the sign, you know what I mean? And as much as I do hate all those kind of blasé terms that get thrown around, it is sometimes hard because the whole point of Aquarius is that it is individualistic. But that's just that's my own superiority rant. Lilith and Aquarius can definitely have that mentality of like, you know, I'm the best because y'all are the fucking same, you know? And sometimes that attitude can be fun and in its place. Also, obviously, these people will hate to admit when they're wrong, but especially when it comes to being a good judge of character or not. Because Lilith and Aquarius already does have some issues connecting with people and finding a friend group that they fit into, they might just really have some trouble breaking off that friendship, breaking off that friend group and social group that may be toxic, that may be very Lilith, very, very, very Lilith in nature. But for the sake of, you know, what other option do I have? Or like, wow, I fit in here, or, you know, even if it's just for the sake of like, hey, at least we're going against the grain, even if it's the wrong way of going against the grain, they might just hang on to that. I mean, it is a fixed sign and they can get attached whether they want to admit it or not.
Interestingly, kind of like where the God complex and I know better than you can definitely show up with Lilith and Aquarius is for the sake of them feeling inferior and feeling like they don't want to give anyone the benefit of the doubt that they are worthy of something, because if they give someone else the benefit of the doubt that they are smart, well educated, then it will ignite an insecurity for the Lilith in Aquarius. So it's like, if you're smart, you threaten my intellect. If you're cool, you threaten my coolness. And so again, it can really manifest as criticality and almost like making people jump through hoops to prove themselves. That's also very relevant in The Secret History, so.
From my total personal bias and opinion, I think that Lilith and Aquarius can definitely be one of, if not the most insecure Lilith sign. I mean, just the fact that it's ruled by Uranus, this deals with, you know, I'm up, I'm down, I'm up, I'm down, I'm up and down. And it's not as tangible as Capricorn. Like, oh, I can look at how much money I have. Oh, I can look at how many followers I have even. It is a lot more like, oh, they're cooler than me. Oh, they're edgier than me. Oh, they have, you know, they have less followers, but that's kind of niche, you know? And that's kind of cool in its own way. You know what I mean? Like, there's intricacies, you know?
Exactly, because there's two different boxes that are seemingly opposite to check for Aquarius. The Aquarius is like, be your own individual, but also belong.
Yeah.
Belong to a group, but stand out completely. So that can be very difficult. And then, you know, it totally makes sense that Lilith and Aquarius would denote a lot of insecurity because the Aquarius sun is already in its detriment. Then Aquarius meeting Lilith, which is not just I'm an individual, but I'm the best individual on the planet. That message of I am good enough, I am better, I deserve to be on top, can really be lost in all of the sauce that is what Aquarius represents.
Like I keep mentioning, Aquarius is an air sign, and it deals with overthinking. And overthinking can lead to insecurity because you're always like, oh, this, but that, but that. You know what I mean?
Yes, and how likely are you to be inherently confident if you're the kind of person who doesn't easily get validated and acknowledged for, you know, what you bring to the table because you are so different?
Or sometimes if you do get validated, you're like, do I want that validation? Is that good or bad? Like, it's so complicated. Like, Leo is like, validation, good. Applause, good. Aquarius is like, is this good? Should I be accepted by the masses? Or is that a bad sign because I hate the masses? Or is it a good sign? Does that mean people like me? You know, like...
But then if I'm not validated, I'm alone and the world is against me and I'm unempowered and I'm a victim, and that's not good either.
Yeah, I will have to say it is not a straightforward Lilith sign.
But isn't that cool how unstraightforward you are? Isn't it cool?
You're so hard to understand. So complex.
Well, why don't you understand me? I'm so cool. Why don't you understand me? No one gets me.
you know, Lilith doesn't super directly deal with sex, but it is a very, very erotic placement. With Lilith and Aquarius, sometimes, because there is some detachment there, the thought of sex might be more alluring or more exciting than the actual act of sex. Or sometimes you might want to have sex because it's the person you shouldn't be having sex with, and this makes you rebellious, and, you know, you're with the James Dean bad boy, or you are the James Dean bad boy, and people shouldn't have sex with you, so when they do, it's like, ooh. But this is definitely a placement that will confront taboo topics loudly and provocatively, and not shy away from them, which I think is a very good positive. And you definitely probably have an odd interpretation of what is sexy and hot to you. What are your turn-offs and turn-ons are probably going to be very different to the norm. And this can even be somebody who is a little bit more, I mean, again, one placement is not going to do it all, but this can possibly be an indication of being more asexual, of being more aromantic, or being only attracted to fictional characters, or, you know, liking more group sex or group activities in that way, although I feel like maybe Aquarius would have some problems with the group stuff, in the sense of, like, being vulnerable in front of that many people, getting along and knowing that many people. Lilith and Aquarius might have some trouble, like, conjuring up a lot of romantic love to give, romantic feelings, so the idea of having to, like, give it to multiple people might be overwhelming, because it's like, whoa, I can barely do that with one person. But there sometimes is very much a detachment with group stuff, you know, then you don't have to give it to anyone, so, you know, it all just goes into itself.
Yeah, but a reason why it might be something that Lilith and Aquarius is interested is because, again, what can be driving those aromantic, asexual feelings is a pent-up energy of the human emotion, that water being compartmentalized and being so in their head and being like, I'm an intellectual, I don't give into the Epicurean delights, and I'm also a Lilith and Aquarius, so I know what the word Epicurean means, yes. You know? But then eventually that can boil over and they're like, I just gotta get it out as much as possible. It can be like all or nothing. And again, there's that detachment still, that emotional detachment, while still letting it all go.
Which kind of goes into, like, what I was going to say is, I think that Lilith and Aquarius, more than anything, wants to give off that I'm a cool girl, I'm a cool guy, I'm a cool person kind of vibe, you know? And there are a lot of celebrities that I think really talk to this. Emma Chamberlain, trying her Gemini sun. She's the quirky, cool, relatable, down-to-earth girl. Not at all. She's not at all. I don't know what you think her life is. She's fucking famous as fuck. Like,
but you know, also, it's the cool girl sort of image is extremely interesting. And you know, the famous Gone Girl, Cool Girl monologue, it's all about, I'm not like other girls, but also I'm everything that you want me to be. I totally fit into whatever it is that a cool girl needs to do, and even I have no inherent personality or sort of like spark inside of me that is individual, because I'm whatever you want me to be, but also not like other girls. And Aquarius is sort of like not individual, and therefore might not have many really personal likes or interests, which is why they can be the cool girl and be like, okay, whatever you want. You want me to down a bucket of wild wings because I'm not like other girls? I'll do that. I don't really care for wild wings. I don't really care for many things because I don't vibrate on that Leo frequency of like enjoyment and heart, you know?
I'm realizing how much of a Leo Lilith I am, because I'm like, this whole Lilith and Aquarius thing sounds exhausting. It sounds like so much to keep up. Also, another example of like the cool girl trope, I don't know much about her, but I feel like she totally gives off this vibe, is, and I'm gonna butcher her name and I'm very sorry, is it Chloe Sevigny? I just literally saw, weirdly enough, right before filming this video, I was on Instagram and I saw this ad for this movie she was in called Kids. Kids, a group of kids. I feel like that's like Lilith and Aquarius. Also, like quirky queer boy trope, Ezra Miller. Even with his face shape, he was in Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Yes.
Totally 100%. Lilith and Aquarius, and those are 100% the characters that he plays. Also, with Lilith and Aquarius can sometimes come in a more fun, light way, an absolutely absurd sense of humor. And I think just a perfect example of this is Eric Andre and the Eric Andre Show. He wants to make people feel uncomfortable. He does this absurd, on the streets, many times kind of comedy. His comedy always makes the other person feel weird and is always at the other person's expense, and it is always very abstract. He kind of created his own, you know, kind of niche group of comedy as well. And as much as he is super duper famous, he is still kind of in the counterculture kind of popularity. And it's on Adult Swim. Adult Swim is all the shit on Adult Swim is Lilith and Aquarius.
And Andy Cohen also did similar on the street, kind of make people uncomfortable things, and he also has a Lilith and Aquarius, doesn't he? Wait, is that not his name?
Andy Kaufman?
Yes, Andy Kaufman.
I included Andy Kaufman. Yes. Perfect example. Very similar sense of humor, different times, but similar ideas, making everyone feel uncomfortable. And also, with Andy Kaufman, comedy that was really ahead of its time, because he was now realizing, like, oh, this shit's being recorded. So instead of doing it for the audience like everyone else does, I'm doing it for the people watching it back. And I'm going to isolate myself from the audience, Lilith and Aquarius. I mean, Aquarius rules a lot of technology and stuff like that, so it makes sense that he used this stuff at his disposal. This can be a placement that's very much fascinated by the absurdness of life, escaping the grayness, escaping the mundane realities. And they can really get a lot more out of life because of their willingness to explore, to go outside of the norm, and their appreciation for the world in a much more individualistic, distinct kind of way, which I think can really be really beautiful, and kind of stretching the world and seeing what you can really get out of it. Also, I think Lilith and Aquarius can also be kind of a placement that might overestimate their abilities, because Lilith and Aquarius can, like I said, feel so robotic, so unhumanistic, that you can then be like, oh, I can accomplish so much more, I can do so much more that a human body just can't do, or a human person can't get done. Can definitely be a situation. I don't think this is like that bad of a thing, but just be a little nicer to yourself and understand that you are a human, I think, is an important thing to tell a Lilith and Aquarius.
I think specifically like neurodivergence that lends itself to savantism.
Yes.
Being a savant, there's like a very small percentage of people who are, but usually it is related to autism. And so it's sort of like that double-edged sword of like, I have these basically superpowers, but certain things I can't just like function normally
Exactly.
doing.
And what do savants have the most trouble with is humanistic emotions. Also, this might be a placement that, like Aquarius, but even I think stronger held than just an Aquarius, is like not asking for help. You know, feeling like it's you against the world, so you really don't want to reach out, or possibly feeling like you don't have anybody to reach out to, or feeling like maybe it could even be like a Lilith egotistical thing where it's like, I want to do this, and if I do this, I want to feel like I did it and it's my accomplishment and no one helped me. You know what I mean? Kind of wanting the credit to all be yours, even possibly. Something that I probably should have mentioned at the beginning with the exile situation is, and might be why in the future you don't want to help other people, is because you might have been initially asked or been responsible for another human being, you know, bearing the water for somebody else, so much so that you had to really put your own ego and put your own needs in the back burner. And you might very much have then been like, I don't want to do that again. I deserve my own time and space, which is valid. But the thing with Lilith is that it doesn't do balance well. So it may go from completely giving itself up and helping to being like, I better not do that again, and I'm not going to help anybody at all, and nobody's going to help me at all. You know, I feel like it's just a lot of extremes. It's Lilith, you know? So let's officially get into celebrities. The first one, I think, when I saw this, I was like, oh, it's coming. It's perfect. This is just to make it easy on me, is Joaquin Phoenix. He played the fucking Joker. And when I was thinking of Lilith and Aquarius, I was like, AKA Joker brain. The way that Joaquin Phoenix looked in Joker, and they really kept on playing to this, is that he has a spinal injury, or some spinal illness or something, and they really, really played into how different his body type is, and exaggerating that. And a Lilith and Aquarius can give you a little bit of an odd look, a little bit of an asymmetricality. And also he was in Her, which is so Lilith and Aquarius. He falls in love with a computer program. Like,
that's Joaquin Phoenix in the roles that he plays. But think, he was the Joker. Think about his Academy Award acceptance speech for the Oscar that he won as Best Actor in The Joker. Do you remember this?
I didn't watch it.
Or did you see this?
Mm-mm.
It's about veganism. First of all, very anti-Leo energy. He wins the Oscar and he's like, don't clap. Don't talk. And then he's like, here are my ideals of how to make a better world. And I mean, it's so Lilith and Aquarius, I think particularly because it wasn't done with much tact. It was like he really alienated the audience and like preached and talked down to them, saying all things that, logically, and especially me, I hold the same opinions. The sense is all there logically, but there was no human connection to the words that he was saying. It doesn't make anyone want to listen to you more if they tell you to shut up and listen. And also it's like anti-Leo, and obviously Aquarius is opposite Leo. He maybe felt guilt of taking that time for himself.
That's true.
Taking that time to be recognized and be proud of his own accomplishments, and thinking, okay, I need to do something different with this time. And maybe even like a bitterness to everyone who went before him who did take that time for themselves. I don't know exactly what was going on in his head, but for the sake of sort of interpreting Lilith and Aquarius, that might be the way that it plays out.
Yeah, and just the fact that he was raised in the cult Children of God.
That's right.
Being raised in it and not really getting a choice. It's not like he's an Aquarius and he went and joined a cult. He was raised in a cult. That's all he knew.
And we keep on talking about how the exile experience has two boxes to check. Like, he was simultaneously exiled from his individuality by being part of a community, and exiled from society by being part of this extremely individualistic, weird, offbeat community. I mean, weird and offbeat just begin to describe the Children of God.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
And a lot of, in Children of God, there's a lot of abuses of people in power, in the sense of the Aquarius leadership kind of power.
And there's even, again, like a detachment from sexuality. I mean, it's obviously like a sexually abusive cult, but one of the biggest terms in Children of God is flirty fishing.
That's using,
using your sexuality in a detached way because you're doing it to recruit people instead of to actually have the human experience of sexual intimacy.
Yeah, and it's one of the few cults that really, or if not the only cult that really is like, it's for the brand. It's for the advertisement of the brand. Go have sex. Go do this Lilith activity, The next person who, I was like, again, another person that I was like, oh, thank you, world, for making it, yeah, that makes sense, is Bjork. Bjork's just a fucking weirdo. There's so many videos on YouTube about, like, weird Bjork moments. Bjork being Bjork. The swan outfit. Just being an oddball, being somebody that's, definitely on the fringes of society. She even one time made, like, dolphin noises instead of singing, and that was, like, a famous video, Quirky! But yeah, also Bjork is from Iceland, and she's been in America, I'm pretty sure, for a while, which that displacement can very much feel like a Lilith and Aquarius. Also, she even mentioned, like, there's this one interview where it's like, somebody's like, I hope that I'm not sounding ignorant, but most people from Iceland, blonde hair, blue eyes. And she was like, because she has dark hair, and I'm pretty sure she has dark eyes, and she's like, yes, I'm the only one that looks like this. Like, I legitimately am, The next person is Susie Sue. She has this in the second house, and she was one of the main figures in the counterculture goth movement, the trad goth movement, and all that stuff, which makes a lot of sense. Lilith and Aquarius. She also appears, you know, slightly androgynous in a lot of ways. Like, even a lot of the traditional goth stuff does not really have specific male or female stuff. The lines are kind of blurred, which I think has also a lot to do with Lilith and Aquarius. And I looked at her early life online, and there's a lot of semblances to this Lilith and Aquarius. For example, she wasn't allowed to invite friends over to her house because her dad was an alcoholic. So even there, you can't really get close to people. You can't have your friends over. You can't have that kind of basic connection that is really even can be an emotional connection, because you know where I live, you know my family. She never was able to have that. She had an unemployed father because of the fact that he was such an alcoholic, and he very much did not fit into this rigid middle class society. But she mentions that she always liked her father because of that, and she was never that upset with him because she kind of understood that feeling. Her family was not at all involved in the community. They hated the suburbs, and she was also very unfortunately assaulted at age 9, and she accounts this to be what grew her to distrust adults as responsible people, as people that will do the right and just thing. Lilith and Aquarius. There was also an event that I read that, just for what she says, is she literally says she was just being a contrarian to be a contrarian for no other basis of logic or reason. And one day she went out to like a gay club at the age of 17 or something like that, and she wore a bra without a cup. Oh no. But she also wore a fucking swastika on her arm, which is kind of common, unfortunately, within early punk stuff. And she got beat up for it. And she was like, guys, it's just because I'm trying to be cool and different. And it's like, that's the harm of Lilith and Aquarius. It's like, that's cool, you're being a contrarian to be a contrarian, but you don't understand the, like, a lot of the implications and what that really means and the harmful effects of that, you know?
Guys, the swastika is ironic.
Yeah, no, it's
like,
not.
What?
Also, somebody said that she appeared fully made, fully in control, and utterly confident, which is exactly what the Lilith in Aquarius wants to and probably will project, whether they are or not.
Yeah, to me it's always interesting the difference between the goth culture and the emo culture, because at least as someone like on the outside who really doesn't know much about it, just looking at the aesthetics, it can seem relatively similar. But emo has the quality of emotional, and goth is just like contrary. It's rooted much more in contrarianism of just like, this isn't the normal way to look.
The next thing that I will say is a state. And it was when I read this again, I was like, makes so much sense. California, the state of California, has Lilith in Aquarius in its 4th house. It's known to be a blue state. You know, Lilith and Aquarius, it's known to be more accepting and more diverse, and everyone thinks they're special when they're in California, and everybody, you know, leaves their hometown to be like, I'm gonna make it big. Lilith and Aquarius, I'm gonna influence the masses, I'm gonna do something different. But also Lilith and Aquarius does deal with a major insecurity of needing to be seen, needing to be known on a wider scale that I think California definitely underlines.
Definitely, and interestingly, though California is just an overwhelmingly blue state, there are extremely red places in California. But California is very much, it holds to political ideologies very strongly.
Yes.
And then despite that, it's not a swing state. Despite that, it's
fixed position.
Yeah.
Whenever anybody's Republican in California, they have this elitist view of like, I may be a Californian, but I'm a Republican. Like, I'm different. I'm the different one in California.
You know what else is that usually the Republicans in California are like, oh, what's the point of voting? Oh, yes. My state is against my political views. Oh, what am I gonna do? No.
Exactly.
Like that kind of me against the world victim energy.
Okay, the next person is, my roommate always gets mad at me because I say his name weird. Steve-O! I always say Steve-O from the Jackass crew. He does crazy, ridiculous stunts. Ooh, I'm crazy, quirky Steve-O that will go and do whatever the fuck you want me to. I'm an edgelord.
The Jackass crew, or at least one of them, is vegan too.
I think he's vegan. Actually, yeah, he is. He's the vegan one. I didn't even remember that.
Anti-SeaWorld.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the stunt with that is he went up the side of a crane and was on top of it, and he had an inflatable whale. It was supposedly to protest SeaWorld. But he was protesting SeaWorld hundreds of miles away from it in a way that really doesn't do anything to get his message across. You know, Lilith and Aquarius, that it just wound up costing him a bunch of money, and it made him more famous than anti-SeaWorld, and he fully admits not thinking it through and it not being a good protest. So, the next person is Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was the leader of the Mongol Empire, and if you don't know, everybody around the Mongolian region pretty much has some relation to Genghis Khan, because he had so many kids. And I think this is very Lilith and Aquarius in the 8th house, like reproduction kind of ideas, where he's like, I feel so alone, I feel so different, so why don't I just make everybody like me, so I don't feel so different, so I have an army of myself.
There were multiple mothers to these children, so despite having a lot of children, apparently he did not cultivate much of a intimate, mutual relationship with one woman throughout this time.
Amber Rose has us in the 11th house, the slut walk. Lilith and Aquarius, I'm reclaiming the word slut. And it's a group, it's a walk. There you go. Scott Disick, he was in the Kardashian thing, right?
Yes. Scott Disick has lost the love of his life, Kourtney Kardashian. They got divorced, but he always wanted to like stay in her life, even though he had like commitment issues to like the mother of his children. He would not get down on one knee, would not like actually formalize the relationship. Then finally she finds someone else and gets engaged within like a span of 6 months to a year. Oh, wow. And it's like, fuck, he thought that he could go around just like keeping that relationship without actually formalizing it, and now apparently he's like suffering for the fact that he can't have what he wants without, you know, putting in the effort, essentially.
Yeah, Lilith, you're gonna suffer. It's gonna be your demise a lot of times, you know?
But another thing is that, like, the one episode of the Kardashians that I watched, Scott Disick, like, bought a little square foot of land so that he could be called a lord.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's the most the vibe. Like, the last person that I'm going to talk about is MIA. She was born in London, but when she was 6 months old, her family moved to Sri Lanka, and for the first 11 years of her life, it was marked by displacement caused by the Sri Lankan Civil War. Her family went into hiding, poverty, very Lilith and Aquarius. She's in London, but she still feels that kind of Aquarius displacement that she was raised around. And she always, you know, in her songs, she's always writing music for the underdog. I mean, Paper Planes, her biggest song, was very political. It was about evading border police, you know, selling fake visas, and a lot of people took that song very wrong. She's like, nobody understands my
No one understands me.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we talked at length about Amy Winehouse in the last video, but she does have Lilith and Aquarius. There's another sense of like people not even hearing her suffering, her emotional turmoil, and her being misunderstood, even though she had all of the warning signs to say that. Not to mention also like a little bit of me against the world. Like, they tried to make me go to rehab. No, I'm not gonna do what they tell me to. But back to MIA, what do you think, like, growing up in your developmental experiences, seeing a civil war will tell you? Is the Civil War, it's not even like us against them. It's us against us. It's like not being able to work together and create something from community.
It would make sense if it caused somebody to have a kind of distrust towards humanity. Her country was a war refugee basically in her own country. Like, it's such a outcasting kind of feeling. And even in a more lesser idea, she went to music school. She just felt like everything wasn't catered to people of color, to women, to queer people, all that kind of stuff. She felt like it was just catered to just a white person in America or in London or something like that, and she wanted to make music for the outcast, for the other person, and all that kind of stuff, and that's always been like a huge mission, and she's always included a lot of her culture within her performances, within her music videos, all her kind of stuff, and I think that's definitely a very positive way that her Lilith and Aquarius has gone.
And we haven't said the disclaimer yet. Well, that's not the most important thing in your chart, because these things are like really intense. Doesn't mean that it necessarily applies to you. But also, little last definite shotgun. Someone who comes to mind constantly with Lilith and Aquarius is Salvador Dali. His pioneering the movement of surrealism is just like, that's weird. Clocks shouldn't melt like that. That's not what it looks like. He kind of is like weird, like, what a weird little mustache. And he paints all these weird things.
I think that is our whole Lilith in Aquarius video. I meant to say this, but I feel like these videos should literally just be called the Lilith Podcast at this point.
Oh god, yeah.
Because that's really what it is.
Thanks for sticking out for this one. It certainly was a long one. I mean, to the point that both of our cameras died and we're just using the OBS audio, so sorry if that doesn't sound so good. Apparently we had a lot to say, and we would love to know what you have to say about this placement, how this resonates with you.
Yes, next up is Lilith in the 11th house. Lots of stuff down below where you can find us, but this video is long enough, so I am going to say thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you next time. Bye!
Yes, thanks for watching. Bye! Bye!